What if the entire Formula One season didn't turn on a crash, a mechanical failure, or even a driver mistake, but on one quiet strategic choice made in a room full of smart people who simply read the moment wrong? What happened to McLaren at the 2025 Qatar Grand Prix wasn't dramatic on the surface. There was no fiery explosion, no dramatic overtake gone wrong. Instead, it was the kind of decision you only realize is catastrophic when it's too late to fix. And that is exactly why it changed everything. Going into Qatar, McLaren had the kind of momentum teams dream about. The MCL 39 wasn't just quick. It was predictable, stable, and efficient in ways that made other teams jealous. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri walked into Lusail knowing the numbers were on their side. They had the pace, they had the consistency, they had the championship in their hands with just a few races left. It was supposed to be a calm weekend, a chance to extend the lead, keep control, and walk into Abu Dhabi with the title practically sealed. But Formula One rarely follows the script. The moment everything began to unravel came early and almost quietly. A small collision on lap 7 scattered debris across the track, bringing out the safety car. Nothing unusual, nothing chaotic. But under the surface, this safety car carried weight. The FIA and Pirelli had introduced an unusual rule that weekend. No tyre could run more than 25 laps. That meant every team had to make multiple stops, and the timing of those stops was everything. A safety car that early in the race was basically a gift. It created the perfect moment to complete one of the mandatory tyre changes without losing much time. Most teams didn't hesitate. Red Bull reacted instantly and brought in Max Verstappen. Mercedes called in George Russell. Even Ferrari, who are famous for overthinking situations like this, didn't miss their chance. Those teams effectively locked in a structured race plan that matched the new tyre limits. McLaren, however, stayed out. No pit stop, no tyre change. No attempt to match the rivals who had already committed to the logical strategy. Instead, Norris and Piastri were left circulating behind the safety car on older tyres while those around them gained free seconds and clean air. The radio messages exposed the confusion almost immediately. Norris politely questioned the call, asking if they had missed something. His voice wasn't angry, it was confused. It was the sound of someone who knew the math didn't add up. His engineer responded with a line that sounded more philosophical than strategic. The others have lost flexibility. In theory, staying out gave McLaren more freedom later in the race. In practice, it boxed them into a corner they couldn't escape. When the safety car ended, the gap between the two groups began to grow. Rivals who had stopped early were able to manage their tyres across the next two stints with predictable windows. Norris and Piastri instead had to pit when the track wasn't ideal, dropping them into traffic and forcing them to warm up cold, hard tyres behind slower cars. They lost rhythm, they lost pace, and most importantly, they lost control. What should have been a simple, safe, championship-shaping race suddenly felt unstable. As the race unfolded, the consequences of McLaren's early hesitation became impossible to ignore. Every lap highlighted the gap between what should have happened and what actually did. The timing of McLaren's eventual pit stops wasn't disastrous in a dramatic sense, but in Formula One, disaster doesn't always come from crashes or engine failures. Sometimes it comes from losing 2/10 here, 3/10 there, and getting stuck behind the wrong car at the wrong moment. That is exactly what happened to both Norris and Piastri. Once they finally stopped, they rejoined the race in heavy traffic, surrounded by slower cars that were fighting their own battles. McLaren's biggest strength, clean air and high-speed consistency, was instantly taken away. The MCL 39 was still fast, but it was now trapped. Hard tyres need temperature to work, and sitting behind rivals ruined their warm-up. This invisible problem slowly chipped away at their pace, costing them more time than any single mistake could. On paper, the strategy looked salvageable. On track, it was sinking from the inside. Commentators quickly picked up on it. The tone wasn't angry, just disappointed. Martin Brundle summed it up bluntly. They had a race-winning car and let the win slip out of their hands. And this time, it wasn't bad luck. It wasn't weather. It wasn't an unpredictable moment. It was a choice. For a team that had spent 2 seasons perfecting strategy, communication, and timing, the Qatar GP felt like watching a watchmaker drop their own masterpiece. The mistake didn't just cost McLaren a victory, it flipped the championship standings into something no one expected. Norris arrived in Qatar with a comfortable lead, 396 points clear of both Piastri and Verstappen. Even a third-place finish would have kept him safe, heading into Abu Dhabi. But finishing 4th, while Verstappen claimed maximum points, tore the cushion apart. Suddenly, the gap shrank to just 12 points between Norris and Verstappen. 12! That's not a lead in Formula One, that's a heartbeat. But the tension wasn't just mathematical, it was emotional. Inside McLaren, a second problem began to grow, one far harder to fix than a strategy slip. With both drivers still technically in the title fight, the team ordered them to hold position. No overtaking, no fighting, no risk. Under normal circumstances, such a call might be understandable, but this wasn't normal. Piastri was quicker at multiple stages of the race. He had the pace, he had the balance, he was watching a potential win slip away, not because of his driving, but because of a strategy error he didn't make. And a team order he didn't agree with. Piastri didn't complain publicly, he didn't call out the team on the radio, but drivers don't need words to show what they feel. When he stepped out of the car, his body language said everything. Shoulders stiff, eyes tired, a glance that carried frustration and resignation at the same time. He knew he could have done more, and he knew he wasn't allowed to. That moment revealed a truth McLaren wasn't prepared to face. Championship pressure isn't just about lap time, it's about trust. And in Qatar, that trust cracked. From the outside, Qatar looked like a single bad race. But inside McLaren, the ripple effect was much deeper. Strategy errors can be fixed, pit stop timing can be corrected. But when a driver feels that a team decision cost them a career-defining moment, that wound does not close quickly. And Qatar created two wounds at once. One for Norris, whose title lead shrank into something fragile, and one for Piastri, who felt a win slip away before he ever got a chance to fight for it. What made the situation so delicate was the timing. This wasn't round 5 of the season when everyone still has room to breathe. This was the closing stretch, where every point is gold and every mistake is multiplied. Norris, as the championship leader, carried the weight of expectation. He knew that any small error could shape how people remember his season. But Piastri, quieter and more analytical, was just as dangerous. He had nothing to lose and everything to prove. And in Qatar, he proved something important. On raw pace, he was every bit as fast as Norris, and in key parts of the race, even quicker. The GPS traces made it clear. Piastri had more confidence in the medium-speed corners and stronger traction exiting the twistier parts of the track. If he'd been given clean air, he could have pressured Verstappen, or at the very least secured a stronger result for the team. Instead, he spent the final laps shadowing his teammate, holding a pace he didn't choose, stuck in a strategy he didn't create. That put team principal Andrea Stella in a nearly impossible position. McLaren had spent years building harmony between their two young stars. They marketed them as equals. They celebrated their differences. They created an environment where rivalry didn't turn toxic. But in Qatar, they were forced to expose a truth every top team eventually faces. You cannot fight for a championship with two drivers pushing each other at 100% every lap. At some point, one becomes the priority. McLaren chose Norris, not in a dramatic public way, but in the subtle decisions that shape a race. And Piastri felt it. Not loud, not explosive, but enough to change the energy inside the garage. Meanwhile, Verstappen watched the entire situation from a distance, and that alone made him more dangerous. He didn't need to dominate the race. He didn't need blistering lap times. All he needed was to stay close enough for McLaren to feel him breathing down their necks. In Qatar, he did exactly that. Verstappen's victory wasn't just about speed, it was about patience. He let the race come to him, and when McLaren faltered, he stepped through the gap without hesitation. Suddenly, the title fight transformed from a McLaren 1-2 into a three-way knife-edge showdown. Norris still led, but the margin was thin. Piastri was wounded, but not broken. And Verstappen had gone from outsider to predator, circling calmly while his rivals made their own mistakes. Qatar didn't just change the points, it changed the psychology. It shifted the pressure, and it exposed the one thing McLaren hadn't prepared for, a championship fight where their biggest threat might come from within. With Qatar behind them, McLaren entered the final week of the season, not as the confident favourites everyone expected, but as a team suddenly unsure of its own footing. The numbers were still in their favour. Norris held the lead, Piastri was close enough to matter, and the MCL 39 remained one of the strongest cars ever built in Woking. But championships aren't won by numbers alone. They're won by clarity, confidence and execution under pressure. And right now, McLaren had cracks in all three. The most worrying part wasn't what happened in Qatar, it was what could happen next. Abu Dhabi was no longer a race McLaren could manage at their own pace. It became a battlefield where one wrong move could hand Verstappen the title. The team's fate no longer rested entirely in their own hands. They now needed both perfection and a bit of luck. And that combination is never comfortable in Formula One. The Yas Marina circuit is known for exposing teams with shaky internal communication. It's a track that demands calm judgment and a willingness to take risks at exactly the right moment. It punishes hesitation far more than raw speed. McLaren knew this, and that added to the weight they carried into the finale. They were fast enough to win, but were they mentally sharp enough to avoid another slip? Norris carried his own ghosts into Abu Dhabi. The memory of losing the 2024 title fight to Verstappen still lingered, especially the blow from the Las Vegas meltdown that left psychological scars. Qatar felt like a distant echo of that nightmare, a race where the team had control until they didn't. That can haunt a driver. And for someone as emotionally invested in McLaren as Norris, the stakes were painfully personal. If he lost another championship because of team decisions, that pain wouldn't disappear with time. It would follow him. Piastri, on the other hand, approached the situation from a different angle. He wasn't expected to win the title, but he had the pace to do it. That made him extremely dangerous. He was the only one of the three frontrunners truly racing without fear. If the car felt good, and the opportunity came, Piastri was never going to back down just to protect the emotional comfort of the team. The question wasn't whether he could fight, it was whether McLaren would let him. And then there was Verstappen, quiet, focused, watching from a distance, like someone who had already seen this movie before. He knew exactly what pressure does to teams that aren't used to leading. He knew McLaren were rattled. He knew both their drivers were now more worried about each other than him. That alone gave him an advantage no setup update or tyre strategy could equal. Verstappen didn't need to dominate. He only needed to be close enough for McLaren to implode again. Inside McLaren's garage, the mood shifted from confidence to caution. Every decision suddenly felt bigger. Every radio message felt heavier. Abu Dhabi wasn't just a race, it was a test of nerve. And after Qatar, McLaren weren't sure which version of themselves would show up. The precision-driven team of 2024 and early 2025, or the confused, hesitant group who let a simple safety car call decide their fate. As the season moved toward its last sunset in Abu Dhabi, the entire championship narrowed to a few simple questions, none of them about raw speed or car performance. Everyone already knew the MCL 39 was a weapon. Everyone knew Norris and Piastri were two of the strongest drivers on the grid. And everyone knew Verstappen didn't need a dominant season to win a title. He just needed to be close enough when others made mistakes. The real question was which team could manage the pressure without blinking. For McLaren, this final chapter wasn't just another race weekend. It was a moment of judgment, a test of character disguised as a Grand Prix. Their biggest challenge wasn't Verstappen's pace or Red Bull's strategy. It was their own ability to trust themselves again after Qatar dented their unity and confidence. Inside the garage, that tension hung in the air. Norris walked in knowing the title was still his to lose, but also knowing one wrong move, his or the team's, could erase an entire year of brilliant consistency. He wasn't just racing for points. He was racing to silence the doubts that had followed him since 2024. He needed this title to prove something bigger than statistics, that he could finish what he started. Piastri entered the weekend with a different fire. Qatar had changed him. It reminded him that opportunities in Formula One disappear quickly, and if you don't take your chances, someone else will. He wasn't angry, but he was sharper, determined not to let a team call decide his destiny. If he had the pace to fight, he would fight. Whether that aligned with McLaren's preferences didn't matter. He had one shot to flip the narrative and prove he wasn't a supporting act in someone else's championship story. And then there was Verstappen, the most dangerous kind of rival. Patient, calm, and confident in his ability to strike when others stumble. He didn't enter Abu Dhabi. Needing chaos, he entered knowing chaos might arrive on its own. Qatar had shown him everything he needed to know. McLaren weren't battling Red Bull, they were battling themselves. And Verstappen, who had made a career out of punishing hesitation, was ready to take advantage of any slip. As lights out neared, the story felt bigger than a simple points fight. It became about identity, about trust, about whether McLaren truly believed they deserved the championship they had spent a year fighting for. Because in modern Formula One, it's never just the fastest car that wins. It's the team that stays coldest under pressure. The team that communicates clearly. The team that doesn't freeze when the moment demands courage. And McLaren's courage was about to be tested more than ever. Abu Dhabi wasn't just a finale. It was the final act of a season shaped by dominance, brilliance, and one strategic call that changed everything. A season where Norris chased redemption, Piastri chased opportunity, and Verstappen hunted blood. When the lights went out, every lap would carry the weight of what happened in Qatar. Every sector, every pit stop, every decision from the pit wall. In the end, the question looming over the paddock wasn't who is fastest, but who will break first. Because this time, McLaren weren't fighting the field, they were fighting their own reflection. and the world was ready to watch how their story ended.